just coming out of some intense rain. We passed an accident on the highway.
3 crosses.
What?
This is 3 crosses.
Oh, starting to clear up a bit ahead though. We're about getting to Gettysburg, on our way to Gettysburg. About another 20 miles from Gettysburg. There we go.
You are here in the lobby of the Visitor Center, just steps away from the Battle of Gettysburg Multimedia Experience, the Gettysburg Museum of the Civil War, and the information and amenities you'll learn while you're here. Be sure to visit our bookstore for information, gifts, and souvenirs you won't find anywhere else. Food and drink are available in the refreshment saloon. If time is short, start with the Battle of Gettysburg Multimedia Experience, then take a battlefield tour. Allow 3 to 3.5 hours for this option. If you have more time, start with the Battle of Gettysburg Multimedia Experience, move to the museum exhibits, and then the battlefield. The battle.
Tuesday morning in the rain. We're going to take a bus tour here.
2008 it was built.
2008?
Both engineers, and they know each other from the Mexican War. So General Meade is a good man for the job, waving at me, you hideous little 8th graders. All those roads, it's a good place to concentrate, and so we're going to find out about that. But it also made us a busy town. We had 6 hotels here, there were 3 newspapers in town, we had 2 colleges, so we were a thriving town because all the roads come here. But like I said, that's also the reason the armies are going to come here. And one of my favorite little pieces of trivia, you can tell if a road was here back then by its name. Roads and pikes were here back then. This is the Baltimore Pike. It was here. If we took the next left, we would be on Hunt Avenue, and avenues were placed after the war by the veterans. So roads and pikes were here back then, avenues were added later on. The only on the high ground, because of course you can see what's coming, so it's going to give you a chance to get ready, and if the enemy attacks you, he's going to have to come up the hill, and he's going to be tired by the time that he gets there. So we're going to go out to where the fighting starts on July 1st of 1863, but at the end of day one, the Union troops are going to fall back here to Cemetery Hill. And left Abraham Lincoln, when he came in November of 1863, he slept on the second floor, second window from the right. That was the home and office of David Wills. He was one of our prominent attorneys here in Gettysburg, and he was involved in having a soldier's cemetery placed here, so Lincoln stayed at David Wills' house. We also think that Lincoln wrote the second page of the Gettysburg Address right there on the town square. And then one more thing here in town, coming up on your right, this is the train station where Lincoln got off the train. And guys, this is also what they would have called the end of the line. We are going to see some train tracks on the first day's battlefield. They would not have been there at the time. This is where the train line ended back then. So, 30,000 wounded. Our town has about 2,400 people, about 400 buildings. So every single building in the entire town ended up being a hospital. I think our smallest building, you could think about this too. I think probably the smallest building is General Meade's headquarters. Can you think of one that's smaller than that? No, so General Meade's headquarters is tiny, and there were wounded in there. So all the way up to the courthouse, the churches, the public buildings, there used to be warehouses along the railroad. Every single building ended up being a hospital. Gettysburg was just one giant hospital for months after the battle. They were still in the process of cleaning things up when Lincoln arrived in November. So very, very unpleasant place to be after the battle. Now, Gettysburg College was here at the time of the battle, but was only 3 buildings. So mostly what you're seeing here is non-historic. So this tile, just about 2 miles. So black ones can shoot about 2 miles. We'll see other ones. We'll see a bunch of them.
Are you still finding movements from the Civil War in the area?
I have never found anything, but I have very bad luck, so thank you for bringing up a very painful subject. I have friends that have found things, and sometimes I dream that I find a bullet, and I'm real happy in my dream, and I wake up and it's not true. So I have never found anything. But I do have a bullet. My friend passed away 2 years ago. He was 94 years old, and he had been a battlefield guide for 55 years. And when he was a little boy, the War Department controlled the battlefield, and they didn't care if you dug. So he gave me a bullet that he found on the fields of Pickett's Charge. So I do have a bullet, but I didn't find it myself. These are, whenever you see a monument with a number and the word infantry, just imagine to yourself 300 to 400 men standing shoulder to shoulder, front line, back line. It's going to help you to picture what the fighting looked like. The monuments stand in lines because the soldiers are fighting in lines. So if you see a line of monuments, simply imagine a line of soldiers. And everything that I tell you is going to make a lot more sense. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, on the small little monument.
They're black and they've got very long, obviously, very long tubes. So up here on Oak Hill, a couple of British cannon. This is the Eternal Light Peace Memorial, and you guys will see the flame at the top. The flame represents peace eternal in a nation united, but that's also what the whole monument represents. The column is limestone from the state of Alabama, and the base.
But always protect law. So to confuse people for the rest of the history, you're going to have the Union really come up from the south because they're protecting Washington. The Confederates, they're partly up there to draw the Union from the south. Robert E. Lee's army, about 75,000 to 80,000 men, and for 6 months before this battle, both of these armies had been down around Fredericksburg in Virginia. So any town where 170,000 men can stay for 6 months, there's nothing left there. But Pennsylvania is untouched by the war. So General Lee is going to bring his army up beyond the mountains, which you can just barely see, and then he's going to spread out over 60 miles. So before the battle started, he would have had Confederates to acknowledge where these different groups of Confederates are. But he knows the closest Confederates to Gettysburg are going to come from the west, like I said, you can just barely see the mountains there. So So General Buford stretched his men here on this ridge. In the distance, there's a monument that looks like a castle, and then we have a couple of smaller monuments stretching towards the hill. Those are General Buford's cavalry monuments. He had his men facing to the west. And at about 7:30 in the morning on July 1st, day one, about 3,000 Confederate foot soldiers, including 3 regiments, the 1st, 7th, and 14th Tennessee, are going to come from just the side of the mountains and slam into General Buford's cavalry.
On the field, there'd be at least 2, maybe 3 in that position. We have about 400, but there were about 700 at the time of the battle. And one of the ladies was asking about the farms, and I'm sure we've all heard that Civil War is a war between brothers. That was literally the case here on July 1st. The farm on your left is the McLean farm, and in the early part of the first day, the farm was being held by Confederate soldiers from Alabama. Later in the day, Union troops are going to come from our left front and briefly capture that farm. When that happened, one of the Union soldiers, his name was Rudolph Schwartz, captured his own brother fighting for the Confederates. They hadn't seen each other since they left Germany. They had gotten separated, and how on earth would you find somebody again? But they had a quick reunion, they had a hug. The Confederate brother was a prisoner, so he was taken to the rear, and sadly, the Union brother was killed later on the first day. So those 2 brothers had their last reunion right here on the battlefield at the McLean farm. And Jim, you have nothing on your right at all. A musket can shoot about 1,000 yards, about 400 yards with accuracy. Which is a big change from the Mexican War. General Grant said that in the Mexican War, your enemy could shoot at you all day with his smoothbore musket and you'd never even know it. They could only shoot about 100 yards. That's part of the reason why the casualties are so large in the Civil War, because the tactics have stayed the same, but the weaponry has gotten so much more accurate. So coming up on your left, you're going to see the headquarters for Confederate General Robert E. Lee. It's this little stone house, and it's got some cannon in front of it. And it was the home of a widow, Mrs. Thompson, and then, you know, once the Union troops are driven back, General Lee is going to take this little house as his headquarters. And he had a chicken who lived under his cot, and every morning she would lay an egg for his breakfast, and General Lee's chicken was named Henrietta. General Lee loved animals, and when he was in Texas before the war, he wrote a letter to one of his daughters. Where are we here in the peach orchard? That's a very good question. In every story, there's a villain. And the villain in the Battle of Gettysburg was a Union general named Dan Sickles. Dan Sickles was a lawyer and a politician. Exactly. If I was a soldier and I had to put my life into the hands of a general, I would like to have a West Point graduate and not a lawyer. Sickles is in charge of 10,000 men, a corps in the Union Army, and he's only been in a handful of battles before Gettysburg. So on day 2, my poor General Meade already lost on the first day. It wasn't his fault. He didn't get here till midnight, but his guys lost. He's been in command for 3 days, 4 now, so he's not going to try to do anything fancy. He's just going to secure... Let me make my fish hook go the right way. He's going to secure his flanks and have his troops shoulder to shoulder. His line will be nice and secure. But Sickles thought he knew better. Now, General Sickles should have had his right flank, because they're facing west, his right flank should have been just to our side of the huge white dome, which is the Pennsylvania State Memorial. So just the side of where the dome stands now, he should have had 10,000 men, front line, back line, extending to Little Round Top. If Sickles was where he was supposed to be, his left flank is on the high ground, his right flank is touching the next unit of soldiers, and it's a solid Union line from Little Round Top to Cemetery Hill to Culp's. That was what was supposed to happen. But Sickles thought he knew better. So against his orders, he moved forward 3/4 of a mile all the way out here to the peach orchard. His new right flank is at the biggest barn with the white steeples on it. So guys, he's supposed to be where that white dome is, now he's where that giant barn is, and now there's a gap in the Union line that's 1/2 mile wide. Now from the barn, his line extends down the Emmitsburg Road where we just drove. The 12th New Hampshire belongs to him, unfortunately for them. And his line's going to come here to the peach orchard, guys, and then it's going to make a 90-degree angle and extend back towards the Round Tops. So poor General Meade now has a gap in his line that's 1/2 mile wide. That's going to be very bad for Minnesota. Very, very bad for Minnesota. He also, the only people on Little Round Top for the Union are 4 guys with flags, signaling for communication. Also, General Meade does not know that Sickles has done this, because when you give your man orders and you don't hear anything, you think that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. But my biggest problem with Sickles is what his move does to these poor guys who are here in the peach orchard. You never want to have an angle like that if you can avoid it, because it can take fire from multiple directions. So these poor men are taking cannon fire from behind us, which is west, also cannon fire from our right, which is south. This area is destroyed by an artillery crossfire on the second day. The trees are going to be destroyed. There's going to be at least 100 dead and wounded horses because they moved the cannon. The brigade that fought here took 50% casualties, and I'm sorry, I've got New Hampshire. I have to tell you something disgusting yet awesome. The 2nd New Hampshire Infantry had these experimental exploding bullets, and so a soldier named Henry Bignall, it's Thomas Bignall, was killed. An artillery shell drove his cartridge box into his body. So he was killed instantly, but his poor friends had to stand there and watch while those exploding bullets exploded in his quivering form. I'm sorry, you're from New Hampshire, and I never get to tell that story. So, in the cave where the snake lived, people called the Devil's Den, but now we call the entire boulder formation Devil's Den. So General Sickles was supposed to have his left flank on top of Little Round Top. He's going to move his left flank over to Devil's Den, this boulder formation. And once I had a lady on tour and she said to me, well, this doesn't seem like such a bad spot for your flank. And I said it wouldn't be if the Confederates were only attacking from the west, which as we make this turn will be coming from behind us. But they're enveloping, so we would be attacked by Texas and Georgia troops from behind us, some more Texas and Alabama troops coming from our right-hand side. When you see Devil's Den from up above, guys, it sticks out like a sore thumb, and the Confederates are going to hit it on either side. That is the first thing that's attacked on day 2 at about 4 p.m. Shortly after Devil's Den's attacked, Little Round Top is going to be attacked, and the attacks are going to go from our right to our left up the southern slope of the hill. And these are some of my favorite infantry in the whole battle, and they are from Alabama, and the reason I like them is they had a terrible day on July 2nd. They got up at 3 o'clock in the morning 20 miles away. They marched 20 miles to get to Gettysburg, arrived at noon, just in time to join in a cross-country march to get to where they're supposed to be. So by the time they got to that spot, they had marched 28 miles. Then they send their canteens to the rear. And of course, when you're in the Army, you cannot say, hey, can you hang on a minute while we go and get our water? So these guys had to attack after marching 28 miles without any water. Part of them had to climb over Big Round Top, which is to your right front, and they're going to attack the 20th Maine. So if any of you saw the movie Gettysburg, the 20th Maine, which is featured in the story, or also the book The Killer Angels, they fought right here. You just can't see their monument because it's kind of a small one. And we actually know the Alabamians got up there. We know because the Alabama colonel, his beloved brother, was mortally wounded beyond where that stone wall is. But the Mainers begin to run out of ammunition, which is kind of backwards of what you would think would happen. So their Colonel Chamberlain orders his men to fasten the bayonet. And another advantage of high ground is gravity. Those Mainers come sweeping down off of that spur and drive those Alabama troops at the point of the bayonet. But they got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, marched 28 miles, climbed Big Round Top, attacked repeatedly. They didn't have any water. They get up there, and here come 350 men from Maine with foot-long knives on the end of their guns.
So it just depends. Okay, guys, I think I have you all. If it helps you to picture the Union line on the 2nd and 3rd day is looking like a fish hawk, right now we're on the eye of the fish hawk. If you look straight north, you're looking down the shank. I can actually see the light green water tank, but it's kind of hard because it blends in. But anyways, where the trees are, that is Cemetery Hill. So, on day 2, General Meade is trying to secure this hill. Robert E. Lee is trying to capture this hill. General Sickles should have had his right flank just to our side is where the huge white dome is. His left should have been here. He moves out to that giant barn with the white windows and steeples, and from there his line extends along the Gettysburg Road. You can follow the red barn. Red barn, red barn, red barn being fixed, peach orchard, that's where the trees get down, that is where his line bends, and then from there, his line extends to the boulders of the Devil's Den, and do you see what I mean about how it sticks out like a sore thumb? And when the Confederates hit it, they hit it on 2 sides. One of my colleagues is spying on it. He's pretending not to notice that I noticed him. Okay. So, Devil's Den sticks out like a sore thumb. So, at about 3:30 on the second day of the battle, my poor General, you see why I love him, he finds out that General